We gonna win now. When Watson come back, it's over with for the league. It's over with.
The dog pound is coming. We have a shot. That's it. It feels unreal. We're gonna run the table with 4. Let's go.
Tom Brady's not the best.
We are ready. We are ready for the rest of the season, baby.
It's been almost 2 years since Deshaun Watson played in a regular season game. Finally, he returns to the field on Sunday as the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns on the road against the Houston Texans. How convenient. Deshaun Watson was incredible in Houston for a few seasons, but he didn't play at all in 2021 after more than 20 allegations of sexual harassment. Ultimately, Watson was traded to the Browns and suspended 11 games. The question now is whether or not Deshaun Watson can return to previous form. The Browns had a Week 9 bye, which meant that Deshaun Watson's eventual return to the field is Week 13, which happens to be at the Houston Texans, and it is going to be wild. I can't possibly imagine what some Houston fans may be yelling at Watson on Sunday. Additionally, about 10 of the women who accused Watson of sexual harassment will attend the game. It is a must-watch game this weekend, especially to see if Deshaun Watson still has it. Deshaun Watson's return to the field will mark exactly 700 days since he last played in a regular season game, and it's very fair to wonder how much that layoff will affect him. He clearly had some rust in the preseason. Watson played in 1 game and had just 3 series. He finished 1 of 5, though there were 2 bad drops by Anthony Schwartz, and the Browns lost a fumble. Deshaun Watson not playing in a full-speed regular season game in almost 2 years is almost surely going to affect his play on the field. Deshaun Watson also hasn't been allowed to practice. He participated in training camp and has been in the Browns building in meetings since October 10th, but didn't see the practice fields until November 16th. There has to be some kind of rust. Add in that he's now with a new team. He has to adjust to Cleveland and Kevin Stefanski's offense. It might take some time for Deshaun Watson to get his feet under him, but if he can return to his old self, the Browns will be set at quarterback for years to come. Deshaun Watson was amazing with the Houston Texans. Houston selected Watson in the first round of the 2017 NFL Draft. It did not take long for Watson to see the field as a rookie. Tom Savage started week 1 and was benched at halftime. The next week, Watson made his first start, and he had his growing pains, but he played well. He dominated in the month of October. He was the AFC Offensive Player of the Month and set an NFL rookie record with 16 touchdowns in the calendar month. Watson had a huge setback, though. He tore his ACL during practice on November 2nd, ending his rookie year. In 7 games, Watson passed for 1,700 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, while rushing for 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. The expectations for Watson coming into 2018 were high, and he lived up to the hype. In his first full season, Watson threw for 4,100 yards and 26 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, and rushed for over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. The Texans went 11-5 and made the postseason. Meanwhile, Deshaun Watson made his first of 3 consecutive Pro Bowls. 2019 was much of the same for Watson. 3,800 yards, 26 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, plus 400 yards and 7 scores on the ground. Houston went 10-6, and Watson ended up winning his first career playoff game in the wild card round. The Texans trailed 16-0 and came back to defeat the Bills. Then the next week, Houston blew a 24-0 lead against Kansas City. Very poetic. 2020 was a rough year in Houston. The Texans traded away DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason and then inked Deshaun Watson to a 4-year, $177.5 million extension. Houston was bad, really bad. The Texans went 4-12, but Watson still played very well. He passed for a league-leading 4,823 yards with 33 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. Rushing, he had 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was absolutely the best season of his career in Houston, despite the lack of team success. But that is the last time we've seen him on the field in a regular season game. Deshaun Watson requested a trade after the 2020 season because he was upset with the front office and coaching changes, but Houston refused until allegations of sexual harassment emerged. Watson sat out the entire 2021 season, and Houston ultimately did trade him, along with a 6th-round pick to the Cleveland Browns in exchange for 3 first-rounders, a 3rd, and a 4th. Cleveland signed him to a 5-year, fully guaranteed $230 million deal. There have been more than 20 lawsuits filed against Watson. A grand jury did not indict him in March 2022, but that didn't escape punishment from the NFL. The league did seek a full-year suspension, but a settlement was reached for 11 games and $5 million. The Cleveland Browns are well out of the playoff picture at 4-7. Only 2 teams in the AFC have a worse record: the 3-8 Broncos and the 1-9-1 Texans. With only 6 games left this season, the Browns would essentially have to run the table. I think the playoffs are an afterthought in Cleveland at this point, and that's okay. The biggest thing for the Browns for the rest of the year is going to be how Deshaun Watson can come along, and if he can show flashes of that Deshaun Watson of old. Nobody is going to disagree that Deshaun Watson has a much higher ceiling than Jacoby Brissett. Cleveland signed Brissett in the offseason, and he started in the Browns' first 11 games with Watson out. He wasn't awful: 2,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, with over 200 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. The Cleveland Browns offense has been good, but not great. There are no questions about the Browns' run game. Nick Chubb is one of the best running backs in the league. Already, he has over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns this season. The offensive line is still very, very good. PFF has it listed at 5th best heading into week 13. It'll be more telling how the passing offense changes with Deshaun Watson under center. The number 1 wide receiver has been Amari Cooper. Cleveland traded a 5th-round pick and swapped 6th with Dallas to get Cooper, and it's been a solid pickup. He has almost 800 yards and 7 touchdowns. There are only 2 other pass catchers with over 200 yards in Cleveland. Donovan Peoples-Jones has almost 600 yards and a single score. David Njoku is coming up on 500 yards and has 2 touchdowns. Cleveland inked him to a 4-year, $56.75 million extension in the offseason. It's a big if, but if Deshaun Watson returns back to his old 2020 form after a 2-year hiatus, the Cleveland Browns could be very good. There is no doubt now that moving on from Baker Mayfield was the right decision. That doesn't necessarily mean Deshaun Watson was the correct solution, but giving Baker a truckload of cash would have been a massive mistake. He had a down 2021 season in Cleveland, and the Browns had a chance to get a talent like Deshaun Watson on the roster, so they took it. Cleveland obviously had to trade him and sent him to the Carolina Panthers for a 5th-round pick, and he was pretty bad. As it stands, Baker Mayfield is 1-5 this year while throwing for 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. His time as a starting quarterback in the NFL is likely over. So even if Deshaun Watson does crash and burn, moving on from Baker Mayfield was the right decision for Cleveland. I am very excited to watch Deshaun Watson play on Sunday. It's been a very long time, and there are a lot of interesting questions that need to be answered, but I don't know how I feel about it. The morality of the situation is hard for a lot of fans to get behind, and I have to imagine that Deshaun Watson will be booed and disliked for a long, long time, maybe the rest of his career. Taking morals out of the equation, Deshaun Watson is a very fun player to watch. He was one of the best quarterbacks in football. It's going to be very, very interesting to see if he can actually return back to what he was. I do fear that this could be a huge bust for the Cleveland Browns, but at the same time, I can see an outcome where the old Deshaun Watson is back, and all of a sudden, Cleveland is a serious contender in a year or so. I just can't wait to see how Deshaun Watson plays on Sunday, and if he just completely disappoints, or if he can show a flash of old. I can't necessarily say I'll be rooting for him, but I'm really interested to see what happens. Are you rooting for Deshaun Watson? And more importantly, do you think that he can succeed in Cleveland?